All right, so this will be the no frills midterm review, meaning it's pretty white PowerPoint, and I do that for a reason. I don't want you to get distracted with pretty graphics. I want you to focus on bold, italicized, and underlined things within the PowerPoint. All right. So the midterm itself, I just said it's going to cover all the information we've covered up to this week and include it. It's been organized by topic and not by chapter, meaning it did not start from the beginning and move through. It's all the information about a given topic and organized that way. Anything inside this PowerPoint's fair game. Use the PowerPoint to study, use the PowerPoint to take the exam. Yes, I said that. Use the PowerPoint to take the exam. All right. Look for bold, underlined, and italicized, as that's going to indicate some importance inside of there. It's only 20 questions. You got an hour to complete it, and the test will auto-submit all the answers if you run out of time. All right. Once you start it, the test has to be submitted, and you'll be presented one question at a time, and you cannot go back to the previous question. So yes, it's one of those exams, but you also are able to use all your notes, the PowerPoint, everything in between. Anybody have any questions on that format? All right, the types of questions you're going to have are going to be a fill in the blank, in which case the fill in the blank, you have to pay attention to the format that's requested. So I say, if I say, give me method blah, then give me the name of the method that's inside of there, right? And you'll see some examples and stuff that I have inside there. If you answer in a format other than what's requested, there's no partial points on that part, all right? That's just for the fill in the blank stuff. The exam cannot grade those fill in the blanks. So you can assume every fill in the blank question is wrong because it can't grade it. All right. Which means when you get to the end of the exam and you end up with your 150 or 120 or something way less than what you thought it was, remember, I have to hand grade these exams. Please don't email me with, I think it should be this and it should be that. Don't do that till after I hand grade it. Otherwise, I get flooded with 75 emails saying, I think I should get points here. You probably should. That's why I have to hand grade it. All right. You also have multiple choice. Those are fairly straightforward. You do have multiple answer ones. Those I will award partial points on. You have true, false, and you have matching. And again, matching, you'll get partial points available on those. But the big ones are the fill in the blank. It needs to go through. Remember that this is Python, and everything that's needed to execute something must be written in that fill in the blank, right? So if it asks for the whole thing or I give you something, make sure whatever I give you is in your answer. Don't shortcut the answer. I need to be able to take whatever you put it into a script file, and it runs, kind of thing. Like it should be in that style format. There are no, here's this, and you got to go do a whole bunch of coding. That's not on the midterm exam anymore. That's now homework assignment 3. All right. It's really just multiple choice, multiple answer, true, false, matching, and a couple fill in the blank. All right. Anybody got any questions on format? All right. So outside of that, the first thing we started talking about was expressions. And remember, expressions are the most basic type of programming instruction. They consist of either values or operators. Notice the bold underline means that those are the things that we're trying to focus on here. All right. So 2 plus 2 will always evaluate down to a single value. A single value with no operators is considered an expression, aka just 2, evaluating only to itself. Right. Conditions themselves is an expression, just more specific to flow control statements. So for example, when we do an expression that evaluates down to true or false, if blah, 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 etc., that evaluates down as a condition and goes to either true or false. All right, we talked about variables. Variables are what we use to store a value of a given data type. We use the assignment operator, which is the equal sign. So for example, spam equals 42. Spam is assigned the integer value of 42, and you can use spam, the variable spam, anywhere inside your code in replacement for 42. Remember, variable names are case sensitive. Again, this matters on the midterm exam. So if I give you a variable name, make sure you use it exactly like it's spelled. If it's misspelled or done differently, then I can't give you the points. It's case sensitive. It's also spelling sensitive, right? So if you see the word gray, if it's G-R-A-Y, then use J-R-A-Y. If it's G-R-E-Y, then use G-R-E-Y, right? Note that the different variables down below, spam, all caps spam, uppercase S spam, etc., those are all different. All right. And those variable names should have some kind of meaningful value to you as the coder. All right. Don't just use A, B, C, D. Use a variable name that's going to make sense to you throughout. Remember, variables can be defined as either global or local scope, and we'll talk about scopes inside functions. These are your naming conventions, meaning that these are valid over on the left-hand side. These are invalid. So you can't use hyphens, can't use spaces, can't start with a number, can't use special characters, things like that. Anybody got any questions on variable stuff? Okay. Data types. We talked about a lot of different data types. So a data type is a category for those values. Every value belongs to exactly one data type. They are either mutable or immutable, meaning that mutable means they can mutate. Those data types have values that can be added, removed, changed. Immutable means they cannot change. Once they're set, they're set. So here's a chart of all the ones that we've learned so far. On the left-hand side, you have the data type. For example, integer, floating point, string, booleans, non-type, etc. Those are all non-mutable, all right, or immutable. Then you're going to have an example of what they look like on the right-hand side. Then lists, notice those are ones that are mutable because we can add, remove, change, etc. We can also do the same thing to a dictionary. Those are the only two data types that you've learned that you can change and modify. Right? Everything else is fixed. Notice that when you pull back something like dict keys, dict values, and dict items, they look like lists, but they are not lists. In order to convert them into a list, you would have to use the list function, in which case they are now mutable. That's the reason we can't sort on dict keys. We have to convert it to a list, then sort it. Anybody have any questions on all these different data types? We covered a lot of information up till the midterm. All right. Boolean values. Those Boolean values have a data type that is either true or false. They must be capitalized, so capital T for true, capital F for false. They can be assigned to a variable, and they're the result of expressions. Non-type values, they're simply just none, right? That's the value. It must be capitalized with a capital N. This is a value without a value and can be helpful to store something that won't be confused for a real value in a different data name. Strings. This is one of the biggest ones we talked about. A string is going to be a value data type. It's always surround your string with either a single quote or double quotes, right? So you have the example of hello there. When you're creating a blank string, such as spam equals two single quotes. String concatenation is how we join two strings together using the plus operator sign. And we have string replication, which is going to repeat that string. We use that with the asterisk operator. Strings themselves are considered the universal data type because you can always convert integers and floats to strings, but you cannot always convert strings to integers and floats. All right. Strings themselves are immutable. We cannot change a string. We cannot mutate it. We can't add, remove. All we can do is completely replace it. So if I have name equals Jason in quotes, right? If I want to take off the N, I have to say name equals JSO, right? It's not changing the string. We actually entirely wipe the string out of the database and put in a whole new string. All right. String concatenation. Again, this is where we add two together. For example, Alice plus Bob is going to put Alice Bob straight together. We can also use it to join two strings together. So if spam equals hello, spam plus world is now going to equal hello world. And we cannot mix two data types, meaning we can't say Alice plus 5. It won't do anything. String replication is where we can use that asterisk sign, etc. And there's some examples in there. Strings themselves are immutable. We can pull out things out of them. So while they're immutable, we can kind of make it look like a list where we can slice and concatenate things out of that string to create a new string from the old, but it does not change the original. So for example, if name equals Sophia Cat and our new name is equal to the first 0 through the 6th index, then we concatenate then we take name, and we only take the 8th index all the way to the 11th, right? And I notice I'm one number short because you're going to go up to but not include whatever that last number is. That will change that from name equals Zofia cat to new name Zophie the cat. All right. Double quotes. Remember that using double quotes, anytime that you have a single quote inside, or otherwise known as an apostrophe inside, it's also common with any strings that have concatenations. So this will create an error. This one is the one that will work. On escape characters, we may need to escape a character, in which case you'll use a backslash. So backslash single quote, backslash double quote, slash T, slash N, and double slashes, in which you'll get out of those. If you need to use multi-line strings, in which case we don't want to escape every single slash in, you can simply use 3 single quotes up here at the top, format it exactly in the format you want here, then do 3 single quotes at the end. That will maintain this dear Alice, comma, a space, Eve's cat is missing, space, etc. All right. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay. We talked about a lot of methods to go along with strings. All right. So those methods, remember, that is whatever the name of your variable is, say spam, dot, and then whatever method you're going to use. So dot upper, dot lower, etc. So dot upper is going to convert everything that's in there to all uppercase. Dot lower is going to convert everything down to lowercase. This is useful anytime you're trying to make some kind of case insensitive comparison. So if I type in a name, you want to see if it's Jason, but it could be capital J, lowercase j, all caps, etc. I can just convert it to lowercase and only check against the lowercase version. We have the option of doing is upper, which is going to be a Boolean, is lower is Boolean, is alpha is going to check to make sure it's characters and not blank, is al num is going to check whether it's letters or numbers and not blank. Is decimal is going to tell us which one are numeric characters, meaning that we're just making sure it's just numbers. We have is space and then is title. Again, is title is beneficial anytime you're dealing with names. It checks to make sure the first character is uppercase followed by lowercase characters. All right. Other methods we talked about is starts with, and then you pass whatever string you want to check. That is going to check to see that it starts with something. Ends with, join is going to take a list of strings and it's going to join them together by whatever you want. Split is going to separate by space, white space by default. If you want to do it by commas or whatever else, you need to pass in the separator value. Note, when I say something like sep equals none, that does not mean give me the full answer of split, parentheses, sep equals none if I asked for this answer. Just give me split. The sep equals none is meaning this is a value you could set. By default, it's set to none, which is white space. Everybody understand that? So if I asked for what is the split method, you would just give me dot split. And if I said, how would you split this string on commas, you would say this string dot split sep equals, and then put a comma inside single quotes. And that would give you the answer as to what that would be for that on the exam. All right. Rjust, you need to pass a width and you need to pass a fill character. Those are required. So anytime I ask you to write justify something, you would do whatever the string is, dot rjust, give me a width, which should be an integer, and you need a fill space character. By default, that fill space is going to be spaces. All right. The one you need to pay attention to here is rjust, ljust, and probably center. Hint, hint, wink, wink, center. All right. Remember the old dad, hint, hint, wink, wink means that's a question on the exam that everybody seems to miss because they don't pay attention to that one. So please pay attention to that one. Remember that when you center something, it's going to add space evenly to the left and to the right. So if we center a 5-character string and we want to center it in 21 spaces, how many is going to be on the left? How many is going to be on the right? So we take 21 minus 5 is 16, right? and we divide 16 by 2, 8. So we should see 8 spaces on the left and 8 spaces on the right. If it's uneven, you're going to have the lower on the left and the upper version on the right. So say I did it by 20 characters, not 21. It would put 7 on the left, 8 on the right. Everybody see how that works? Okay. Strip is going to strip off any leading white characters, both at the front and the back. L strip is just going to strip anything off from the leading part. R strip is going to strip anything off from the trailing spot. All right, so I'm going to have a bunch of examples in here so you can see what I'm talking about. You're going to have spam equals hello world. If I want to convert this all to uppercase, I just use spam. Spam equals spam dot upper. All right. So if I say, here's your string, hello world, how do you convert that to uppercase? You would just say hello world dot upper. It converts everything to uppercase. Dot lower is going to convert everything to lowercase and on through. All right. Anybody got any questions on strings? There's a lot of different methods. You just need to know which one does what. Yeah. Yeah. The idea is whatever you pass it to center on. Let me get back to center. Okay. You give it the overall width. So you don't need to know what goes on the left and to the right, right? You just want to give some string dot center, and then the first number is going to be however width you want to center it on. You don't. But if I give you the output of it, you need to go back and tell me what the command was that did that, which means you would want to count all the spaces across, then subtract however many the actual string is, right? So say there was 21 spaces in the example I gave you with the word center in the middle, you would subtract 5 from center based on the total of however many were there. That is going to be your overall width. You would make sure that the total amount is all the way across. And then your fill character, if it's using a fancy fill character, make sure you move that across. Play with this one, test it, write some example code so you're familiar with how it works. This is the number one missed question on the whole thing. Right? I say that there's a lot of missed questions, but it's usually because somebody didn't read the bold underlined part of whatever I highlighted. And I don't know what else to do. Like I can't put flashy lights on the exam. I tried. It doesn't let me do it. Tuples. Anybody remember tuples? They're like a list, but not a list, right? They're still an ordered sequence. They are used with parentheses around them, but they are immutable, meaning we cannot change them. They cannot be modified, appended to, removed, etc. So if we have spam equals hello, notice this whole thing is in parentheses. That means this is fixed. We cannot modify this once we set it. Right? Tuples are usually used to convey things that do not have intended for a sequence to change. So this may be settings inside your program. This could be other things that are just background data that will never change. Okay, because they do not change, Python has some implements there that make them a little more optimized, so they're going to be slightly faster than lists. Okay. Lists themselves are also an ordered sequence. A list value refers to the list itself, not the values inside of it. Each one of those items inside of a list is called items, right? So each one of the things inside of the list is an item. They must be comma separated, just like what you would saw in the tuple here, comma separated. You can use the len function to calculate the number of values that are inside that list. Lists themselves are mutable, meaning that we can change things, and they are used by square brackets. So here's an example. My cat equals square brackets, fat, gray, loud. If I wanted to pull out the indexes of those, I would calculate starting at 0. So spam 0 would return me cat. If a list contains other lists inside of it, you would have to pass multiple indexes. So if I have this overall list, which has 2 lists inside, we have cat bat in one list, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 in the second list. If I wanted to get back bat, I would have to say spam 0, give me back this first list. And of that list, I want the one index, not the first index, but the one index. Yes, this would become 1 right here. Yep. Fantastic questions. Thank you for asking questions, because somebody out there has these questions and nobody's asking questions this semester. I'm assuming you're all going to get A's. I'm hoping. If not, maybe people ask questions after the halves. It's mid-semester, right? Negative indexes. All right, last index is -1. Okay, so if I wanted to get mouse, I could use -1 as opposed to going with what? Mouse is not only -1, it is also 2, right? 0, 1, 2. All right, slices is a way for us to return either a single value from, which is the index that we did before, like this, that gives us back a single value. If we want multiple values to come back, we use a slice. So a slice would be something like 1 to 4, in which case we go up to, but do not include the 4. So that would give us back indexes of 1, 2, 3, right? That's going to explain exactly what I just said. You can leave out either one of those indexes if it is a 0. So if I wanted to start at the beginning, I could just say :4, and that would imply there's a 0 before the colon. If I'm going up to 0 over here, I could leave a 0 at the end, or I could just put 1's colon, which wouldn't make much sense, but you can do that. Okay, changing a value in a list. You can use the assignment statement in order to change a value inside the list. So if I want to change bat to aardvark, then I would say spam1, because that's the index of bat, equals aardvark, and now the overall list is going to be changed. Okay. We can also do concatenation and replication just like we could with strings. So you can add, so to speak, 2 strings together, which will concatenate those together. You can also do that with replication, in which case you want to replicate it over and over and over. Okay, so how do we start deleting stuff? Well, if we know what index we want to delete, we use a delete statement. Okay, so if we want to get rid of cat, we say delete spam1. The spam list is now going to be dog horse. Spam1 actually refers to horse now, right? So once you delete something, all of the indexes are going to shift back. So that means the values have changed. For loops. With the for loop, this is how we iterate over a list, and this is how we can cleanly print out a list. All right. So if I have sum list equals ABC for I in range of the len of some list, right? So what this does in the beginning is it takes some list and it's passed to the len function. That is going to calculate what? How many values are in here, right? Which should give us back 3. So now we have for I in range of 3, which means what? What does range 3 mean? It's the same as doing 0 to comma 3, right? Which means we're going to start at 0 and it's going to go all the way up to 3, but not include 3. Make sense? So it essentially creates a list that says 0, 1, 2. All right. Then when we print this, we're going to take that index of whatever we just had here. So the first number is 0, right? We're going to plug that into some list. I'm missing a parenthesis here. I see that now. Some list 0, which will come back here and grab A. And so the first time it goes through this for loop, it prints A. The second time it prints B. The third time it prints C, which is exactly what it's explaining down here. Anybody have any questions on using a list and range and how that all works in the len function? Yeah. So brackets are always going to be lists, right? Parentheses are usually when you're doing some kind of method. So in here, you have some list, you have the len function. So you have len, you have a parenthesis because that is a function, you're passing in some list. Same way with the print statement, right? You're using the print function, you pass it into some list. If you're dealing with a list or an index, it's square brackets. That makes sense? Yeah. Awesome. The only thing that makes it a little complicated is if you're dealing with tuples, because those are parentheses as well, right? But you don't deal a whole lot with tuples in real life. All right. With lists, we have the multiple assignment trick. This is another one people mess up on the exam, so pay attention to it. If we have a list that says cat, and that is equal to a list that has fat, orange, and loud, cat 0, we could assign to the word size. Cat 1, we could assign to color. Cat 2, we could assign to disposition. Or we could use the multiple assignment trick, in which case size, comma, color, comma, disposition equals cat. That puts that in the right order, right? If I was to jumble these up and say disposition equals cat 2, color equals cat 1, size equals cat 0, aka run this upside down, does that change this line down here? So I have size equals cat 0, color equals cat 1, disposition equals cat 2, right? Multiple assignment trick says if I put size, comma, color, comma, disposition, so this is 0, 1, 2 equals cat, it would automatically assign those, right? If I was to move disposition equals cat 2 up here above size and size down to the bottom, would that change this line? No, right? Because we're only focused on what these individual or the order that they go down here. If these are out of order, it doesn't necessarily change this, right? Or if I want a specific order down here, I have to do the ones that match the numbers up here. Just because I move these around doesn't change the output. Everybody understand how that works? So if I want size to be in cat 0, no matter where it's listed here, right? I need it to show up as the first one down here. That means it goes to the 0 index. This, again, is one of the ones that people miss all the time. Just because I messed these up a little bit up here, as long as these numbers are all what we want it to be, you list them out in the numbers as they go across. Size will always be 0, color will be 1, cat will be 2. Or disposition will be 2. Okay. I've never given more hints on the midterm exam than this, so I expect all A's on that. On the list, there's lots of methods we have with the list. So we have dot index. This is going to give us some value. If that value exists inside the list, it's going to return us the index of whatever that is. So if I had this, for example, fat, orange, loud, and I say dot index of orange, it's going to pass me back what number? 1, right? Because it's in the 1 index. All right, append is going to add something to the end of the list. Insert, we can have to specify what index we want to insert it in and then the value that we're inserting. Remove is going to be removing the value. Note that you use the delete statement when you know the index of what you want to remove, the actual number, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. You use remove when you know the value that you want to remove and you have no idea what index it's in. Okay. Sort function, if you want to use the, or not function, sort method, if you want to use the sort method, by default, reverse equals false and key equals none. I do not, if I asked about the sort function, don't put this stuff inside of here. This is just telling you that if you wanted to set reverse to true, then it would reverse the order, right? So dot sort is how we are going to sort in ASCII-betical order, meaning that it's going to do uppercase characters, then all the lowercase characters. If I want to sort in regular alphabetical order, I need to say key equals str dot lower, and it will sort in regular alphabetical format. If I say reverse equals true, it's going to go from Z to A, for example. All right, so here's examples of all those that we just talked about. Dot index, I want to know what hello is. It gives me back the 0 index. If I want to add hola back to the end of it, then I do dot append and I get hola back at the end. If I want to insert sup in here on index 1, then it will go ahead and put sup up over here. Okay. Remove, we tell it which one we want to remove, and it will go ahead and remove it. And if we do dot sort, it's going to sort it in alphabetical order. All right, our lists are like list-like data types. Remember that those are going to be something that comes out of your dictionary. We'll talk about those here in a minute. You can treat them as such, like strings and tuples, etc. All right. Anybody got any questions on lists? There's nothing here you really need to know. It's just background info. All right. Dictionaries are going to be important. So remember, a dictionary contains multiple values in an unordered sequence. So there is no index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. you have a key value pair. So your indexes are now keys. Your values are going to be on the back side of that. Dictionaries use curly braces. All right. So I have a dictionary here, my cat, with a key of size, a key of color, and a key of disposition. I have a value of fat, a value of gray, and a value of loud. And each one of these are associated to one another. Right? Notice there's a colon that separates the key and the value. It also has a comma at the end of those. Some of you guys were seeing that in your homework assignments. You might have been missing commas and things like that. If you miss a comma, it's going to give you some kind of syntax error. All right, you've got to have commas between these overall pairs. You can also write it in this format so that it's easier to read going down. All right, so this one's acceptable. This one's even better. All right, you refer to a specific dictionary item by its key. So for example, if I want to get the size of this out here, I would say my cat size, and that would return me back fat in this case. All right. The items in this case, or the whole colors, are going to be size, fat, color, gray, disposition should have a lowercase d. One of these days I'll get this whole fixed. Loud, right? Because disposition up here is a lowercase d. All right, the keys are all these. The values are all these. Anybody got any questions? Okay. Methods that we use on dictionaries. So does everybody understand the difference between function and methods? It's okay if you don't, because I can help better explain that. Absolutely. So a method is used on something, all right? Meaning, if we go back to this list, a function is where you put a value inside of it. So think the print statement, right? You go with print, parentheses, you stick something into that. That is a function. A method is ran off of a variable. So I have a variable called spam, which is a list. I use spam dot remove, and that is a method. Anytime I have to do dot something, that's a method. And what that means is run the remove command on this variable, where a function is you pass something into the function. Now it's clear in my head. Is it clear in your head? And if not, I can find a better way to explain that. Exactly. Methods are ran on some kind of variable. So if it's a list, you have all these different methods of sort, remove, index, append, all those kind of things. On a dictionary, we have 3 different methods, which is keys to get back all the keys out of the dictionary, values to get all the values, items to get a pairing of the key and the value. So keys are going to return what looks like a list of all the dictionary keys. It is not truly a list. Think the Ford example, right? We got back all the keys of all the names of the car. When we wanted to sort those, we had to pass them into the list function in order to create a list. Then we could sort those. We cannot sort on a dot keys. Even though it looks like a list, it's not. And it will tell you that. Okay. Well, remember that items is the one that returns back a list of tuples, so to speak. And those tuples are where the first value is your key, the second value is your value, or the second one in there is the value. Remember, we use the multiple assignment trick. All that means is when we get to this example here, so spam.keys, we can see if name is inside of there. Values is going to look for all the values and keys, and it doesn't do items. So remember in items, what we typically do there for the quote multiple assignment trick is we have something like for K, comma, V in dictionary, whatever it is, dot items, right? K is now going to be your key. V is going to be your value that comes out. We can call that whatever we want. K and V are completely irrelevant, but we call them KV because it makes sense that K is keys and V is values. All right, with dictionaries, we can use the get method, which allows us to retrieve something out of the dictionary. If it doesn't exist, we tell it what to return. All right, so I can do a look for a value in this dictionary. If I want to know what its age is, right? Age does not exist in here. So I would use .get age, default equals none, which means it returns nothing back to me if it doesn't exist. Set default will say, okay, age. If age doesn't exist, go ahead and set what that age should be equal to. So by default, age should be equal to 5. It will go ahead and add that to the dictionary. That's the difference between these two. This set default is the one you want to pay attention to. Okay. Anybody got any questions on lists and dictionaries? Again, it's okay if you do, because somebody out there has questions, I assure you. Order of operations, you guys know this from grade school, high school, whatever it is. You're also known as your precedents. So this is the order they go in. These are the symbols you use for those operators. All right. Comparison operators, this allows us to evaluate something down to true or false. Okay. A float or an integer will always be unequal to a string, meaning that if we have 1 in quotes, it's never going to be equal to just the number 1. Okay. So if we have something of the operator double equal sign, that's for equal to. Not equal to is a exclamation mark equal sign, and on down the list. Right. Any data type is supported with equal to or not equal to. However, we can only use integers and floats to check if something's greater than, less than, et cetera, right? We can't see if A is greater than B unless we do the whole OR chart thing that we learned in the lesson. By default, you cannot. Does everybody kind of understand what this chart means? Most of you should remember greater than, less than, how that all works, et cetera, right? Boolean operators, this is where we're testing for and, or not. So and or will always evaluate down, and those are considered binary operators. Not is basically just the opposite of that. So these are your truth tables that you have relevant to that. True and true is true. Anything with true or aka anything with false in it is always going to be false when you're using and. On or, it's the opposite. If it's true or true, it's going to be true. Unless it's false or false, then it's false. Not, it's just the opposite of it. All right, remember there's a difference between a double equal sign and an equal sign. This is where people often mess up on their if statements, etc. when you're doing checks. A double equal sign is equal to. A single equal sign means you're assigning some kind of variable. So is 2 equal to 2, or is spam equal to 2? That kind of thing. Or this isn't asking is spam equal to 2. We're saying spam is equal to 2. We also talk about the augmented assignment operator. This is the same way of doing something over here, right? So the long way of adding 1 to a value of spam, we would have to say spam equals spam plus 1. We can shorten that by putting plus equals 1. Where people often mess up here is they'll say equals plus. They'll do the opposite of this. Don't do that. Make sure your operator's in front with an equal sign after it. Okay. You can also do this with not just numbers. You could also do this with extra strings. So we could say something like spam equals hello, spam equals hello, or spam equals spam plus world. You could shorten that with plus equals world and get the same effect, where it's going to equal hello world. Just a shortcut to add stuff to the string. We talked about in and not in operators. This is just where you can check to see if something is in there. So, for example, in, we can say is value 1 in value 2. For example, is value 1 car, value 2 is this list. We would say is car in this value here, kind of thing. All right. Gets us to flow control. So flow control is basically lines of Python code that is all grouped together in blocks. All right. Blocks begin when the indentation increases. Blocks can contain other blocks, and the blocks end when the indentation moves clear back to the left or decreases to 0. So we talked about a whole lot of different statements that we could use, starting with if, else, if, and else. So you have an if statement, and you must use the if keyword. It requires some condition after the word if and is only executed if it's equal to true. All right. Requires a colon after that, and then some clause underneath, aka the code you're going to run if this statement is true. elif is going to do a chain to where it checks the first one, it'll check the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. All right. The idea behind using if and elif and not just putting two if statements in a row is that it will check this one, then check this one immediately for the same style check. All right. Else statements, you can use those to treat it as a catch-all. So there's no condition on an else. It's just else period or a colon, and then whatever clause you want inside. So what do those really look like? Let's look at an if statement. I assume I have one. I don't. We can look at those if we need them. Remember, the main thing to remember on an if, elif, and else, elifs are not required. Elses are not required. All right. The only one required is an if statement. So you do not have to have elifs on an elf. You do not have to have an else statement in that sequence. Anybody got any questions on ifs and elifs? I think homework 2 kind of drove a lot of that home. Okay. Your while loops. Remember that while loops require some condition, is only executed if true, which is why we use while true a lot when we're testing somebody's input, because it's always going to stay in that condition. All right, requires the clause to be indented below, which is AKA the code needs to be indented below that. You can use break and continue statements in order to get out of there. So break is going to break you out of the while loop. Continue is going to start the loop back over. And in a while loop, the loop will continue indefinitely until the condition evaluates to either false or a break command is used to get you out of there. We have a for loop. And so a for loop, we use the for keyword, some variable name, the in keyword, and then some argument that we want to check through. So whether that's in range, in a list, in a dictionary, another string, etc., we're checking for something in there. And then a colon after that. The difference between a while loop and a for loop is a while loop will indefinitely stay in that loop until you get out of it. A for loop is finite, meaning there's only a certain number of times we're going to run through that. So however many variables are inside your list, however many letters are inside a string, items in a dictionary, etc. The equivalent while loop for a for loop would be doing something like while 1 plus 2, etc. For loops are used to be more concise. That's a piece you need to know. Anybody got any questions on if statements, for loops, while loops? How to get out of those? We use a what? Break, right? Continue statements, you can say those. You do not have to. You explicitly state them when you want the while loop to start back over. Otherwise, it will inherently start the while loop back over again. All right, that takes us to functions. Functions themselves are like little mini programs within your bigger program overall. All right, those functions are used to avoid duplicating code. So if you're writing something over and over and over in your code, it's best to create a function so you can just call that function to execute that piece of code. It can also be used to organize your code. So if you remember the menu options we did with option 1, option 2, option 3, we may want to compartmentalize option 1 code here so that we can segregate that out. Functions start with a def statement, DEF, parenthesis, whatever we're going to do. All right. We have a colon. It can take in values, which are called arguments. That's what goes inside the parentheses. So think back to assignment 3, where we used the for example. We had something like new dictionary cars, right? Cars is what we passed into this function. That is our argument. We have a parameter is a variable that an argument is stored in while the function is being called. Parameters are forgotten once the function returns, meaning that when you create variables inside of the function, they're only good for that function and then they get destroyed. They can contain a return statement, and if they do not return a contain statement, by default, it's returning nothing. Okay. Return statement specifies what you're giving back. So if you think back again to assignment 3, we did the first function, which was create a new dictionary. We wanted to return a dictionary back to us. So we would use the return statement and then whatever dictionary we're returning back to the user. All right. While the expression is used, the return value is what the expression evaluates to. Don't worry about that part. Okay. Keyword arguments. So what do functions look like? We have this function here called example. Def example. Let's go back here. This first one is start. We have stop. Then we have low equals none and high equals 1,000. So start and stop are required because we don't see an equal sign there, right? Start, stop. They're required. We must pass those values in. For example, we have example down here, 2, 10, in which case start is 2, stop is 10. Low is set to none by default. High is set to 1,000 by default. If we want to change these values of low and high, we must still give the two variables for start and stop. Then we can specify high equals something or low equals something. What we can't do is say 2, low equals 5 because we're missing the stop value. That's the reason we get the error here. Does everybody see how we call functions here? This is where a lot of people get screwed up until all of a sudden they get it and then they fly through it. Use this slide to kind of help you get through there. All right, we talked about scopes. We have global scope and local scope, right? Any variables you set out on that basically start on the far left of your screen, those are going to be considered global scope, right? If we use the same variable inside of a function, that is a local scope, right? If we want to use a variable from the outside, we must say global, whatever the variable name is. Okay. Does everybody see that? So if we had spam in a function here, and there was some variable on the outside called eggs, we could now modify that by saying global eggs, then eggs equals now this. Therefore, eggs is globally this, spam. When we call this spam function, that changes this variable to be now this. And when we print this, it will get now this. So this is your block of code here, right? Because functions are always at the top. This eggs right here is our global variable. Eggs equals globally this. Then we call the spam function, in which case the code starts up here. It pulls in global eggs right here and now says eggs is equal to now this. At this point, we go back and print the global variable, in which case, because we modified it, it will now print now this on the screen. Is there anything bold on this slide? Global eggs, all right? If I want to modify the variable eggs, I have to put global eggs. I can't just use the word global. I have to specify what variable I'm pulling in. Hint, hint, wink, wink. This is the other one that everybody misses on the midterm exam. If I want to modify the global variable eggs, I would have to say global eggs in order for that to work. If I just say global, that doesn't work. It would actually get you an error in Python. So if you answer global to me and don't give me the variable name, I can't give you the points because the program will crash. Everybody see that? Study that. Know that one. It's the one everybody complains they should get partial credit on. I can't give you partial credit. Just because you answer global, I can't give you partial credit because if I put global in a Python script, the script crashes. You have to give it the variable name behind it. Okay. Scope rules. This basically says that while it's local, it's local. While it's global, you can modify it as long as you say global before. Okay. How to tell if a variable is either local scope or global scope. There again, if it's out here and on the far left of the code, it's global. If it's inside of a function, it's local. It's that simple. If I have the same variable name between here, for example, say I take out global eggs and I just say eggs is equal to now this, well, then I did not change this global eggs. Therefore, nothing happens when I run this function. Nothing will get executed. Nothing will change because I'm not modifying this global one. When I print down here, I'm printing the global one, not this internal one. Everybody see the difference on local, global? Again, global is clear out here on the outside. Local is what is inside the function itself. And if I never say global eggs, then this eggs is local, this eggs is global. But because I say global eggs, now I'm modifying the same one. These are the exact same thing. All right. On how to handle exceptions, we talked about using try and except statements, right? You always want to put anything, if your code has a potential to fail, put it in a try and except statement. Because if it fails, well, then you can have an except and you can put in on the screen, hey, there's a bug, there's something wrong. So if you think that your code could have an error, like converting a string over to an integer, right? You would put that in a try and except statement, because if somebody put in JSON, well, that's not an integer, therefore the program's going to crash. What else could I do to check to see if JSON was equal to a number? What's that? Alpha num would let us know whether it was alphabetical characters or numbers, right? So if it's alphabetical, that would cause a problem. You're on the right track. Which one of those methods would actually tell us whether or not it was a number? Is decimal, right? So we can now check with is decimal going through. You're on the right track, because you were checking to see if it was had a number in it, but in this case, this one would have a letter in there, which would cause a problem if we're trying to convert that to a number. Yep, nope. You're on the right track. Okay, let's take us back to this side. All right, so again, try and accept clauses. This is when you want to do something that may crash your program, put it inside a try and accept. All right. These are now going to list all the different functions you guys learned in this class, the ones that are built into Python. All right. So we had the simple ones, string, integer, float. This just allows us to convert whatever that value is over to something else. So string, str, and put the value inside of here. That will convert that value to a string. This one converts it to an integer. This one converts it to a float. Now, it may not be able to do that, right? But this is the function you would use to convert those. So the str function, we have the string of 42 here, evaluates to 42 so that we get a 42 inside of quotes, and that will pass as an integer. Right? On the int function, if we try to do an int on something that is not an integer, example, something that is a floating point, this will not work. We will get a value error. If we have the word hello and we try to convert that to an integer, it will also give us a value error. Does everybody see why this one fails? Whoops. And this one works? It's because this is a string, right? We have the two quotes around it. Therefore, we cannot convert that over to this side. We can pass in an actual float into an integer and actually get a float back, or an integer back. But we cannot pass in a string in order to get that back if it is a float. Okay. Float, exact same thing. We cannot pass in a string in order to get back this if it is letters and characters inside. Notice on float, we can pass in an integer and get back a float. We just can't do that on this side. All right. Print function. You guys use this one all the time, right? So if I print hello world, by default, it's going to print hello world down here, right? If you want to print a blank line, you don't pass anything to print. We just say print. Okay. What's nice about print is by default, it ends with a new line character. That's why this works. When we just call print, by default, it always ends with a new line, which means it prints a blank line on the screen. If we want to change that so that it doesn't print a new line, that it actually prints, I don't know, 3 colons, then it would go ahead and say end equals whatever we want it to be. It would then print end with 3 colons at the end. Or it would print 3 colons at the end of that. If we wanted to separate each one of those by something, we could say sep equals this, and then it would separate by 3 dots in this case, or commas, or whatever we set that to. By default, that separate character is a spaced character. And again, here's some more examples of how print works. All right, we also talked about the input function. The input function is going to allow the user to type something into the user or into the program and press enter in order to execute it. All right. This is usually assigned to some variable so that we can take whatever they typed in and do something with it. Otherwise, does no good just to have input. Unless you're wanting them to press enter to continue, in which case you could just have input colon. When they press enter, it continues on. Doesn't matter if they type something in, press enter, it just gets erased, right? For those of you guys building text adventure games or something like that in the midterm, that's a great way to have them continue on, is just have them press enter. Okay. The value that comes from the input function is always a string data type. So even if you type in a number, it's always going to come in as a string. We would then have to convert that over to an integer so that we could do math on it. So you ask, what is your age? We type in a number. If I want to add 10, I got to convert that to an integer, then add 10, then put that back into a print statement to go back out to the user. All right, inputs. This is just going to show you those exact same things I was talking about. You can print a question and then ask for the input. If you want to ask for it inline, you can just put that question right inside the parentheses. A lot of times you guys will see when I code in class, I tend to put something like greater than, colon, etc. All that is so that the user can see the blinking cursor. That's it. Anybody got any questions on print and input? All right, we talked about the len function. Again, this is used to calculate the length of either a string or maybe a list, so we can see how many items are actually inside of there. Range function, we talked about this one. It starts with a number, stops with a number, and then we have step. Okay, start is always going to start at 0 unless we specify, in which case if we say range 5, 3, well, then it's going to start at 5 and go up to 3. That's not really going to work, right? So these are the order that you have to put those numbers in. If I want to change the step, I have to specify start and stop, because otherwise it's going to not put it in the right spot, so to speak. Remember, start starts at 0 unless we specify it. Stop goes up to, but does not include. Right? Step is going to be however much you want to step by. So if you want every 2, then you put 2 for the number step, and it will count by 2s. Type function, this is just to figure out what data type something is. So if you have no idea what this particular object is, and you're trying to figure out its data type, you can just pass it into the type function. We never really use that because it's only helpful when you're debugging lots of different things in a big assignment. In your guys' case, you already know what that is because you coded it. All right, we have the list function. The list function is going to convert a tuple or a string or something like that into a list. So note, if I give you the list, which is a parenthesis cat, dog, 5, right? I say, here's a list, or in this case, here is a tuple. I want you to convert that to a list. I must have that tuple inside this list. If I don't put this parenthesis here and this parenthesis here, I'm not passing in a tuple. I'm passing in a bunch of things into the list function. This is again where somebody misses those questions on the exam. So if I give you a tuple or I give you a list and I say convert it to something, you must put it inside the function. Everybody see that part? Should have seriously all A's on the midterm at this point. If I pass in a string like hello, it's going to convert hello over to a list. That way you could change it, modify it, do a for loop. You could do anything goofy, whatever you want. All right. Tuple function does the exact same thing, only you would pass in like a list, something like this. So if I said, here's your list, cat, dog, 5, convert that to a tuple. This is exactly what you would type in on the blank line. Everybody see that? Cat is lowercase. If you put in capital cat, it will not work. I cannot accept that as an answer because it's not the same. Okay. Last thing we learned, regular expressions. There isn't a whole lot of this on the exam. Okay. But it will ask you like import re. In other words, what module do you import to do regular expressions? RE module, right? You would then create a regex object using re.compile. You can use the search method. The search method returns how many results? 1 or 0, right? It returns the first result it finds unless it doesn't find anything. The opposite of that is find all, which will allow us to find all the answers, and it returns a list. This will give you an example of how to do the grouping and things like that in regex. This slide is for your reference. If there's a question on the exam, which I'm 99% sure there's not, use this slide to get you through that answer. Okay. The pipe symbol, this is the or, right? So Batman or Tina Fey, whichever one it finds. The find all method, the difference between these two, search is the first instance. Find all is going to return everything it matches. The substitute method has 2 arguments. The first one is whatever we want to replace. And the second one is the string that we want to search through and replace it. If we're going to do regular or compound complex regexes, you would use, instead of something like this, you could do this where it would be nice and cleaned out so you could use comments on each one. Again, you do not have to memorize this stuff. Okay? So don't spend your time trying to remember what /D means. You don't need to know that part. I take that back. You don't need to know what these long strings mean. You should at least know this character class, right? Which means lowercase d is digits. Uppercase D means anything that's not a digit. Okay? Lowercase w is any letter, number, character, underscore, etc. Uppercase is the opposite of that. /S is going to be any space, tab, or new line character. Capital S is the opposite of that. All right? If you want to create your own special classes, like we did in the example of all vowels, for example, then we would have A-E-I-O-U, all caps A-E-I-O-U. It would return back any vowels. If we wanted to match anything other than that, then we would just put this little caret inside this character class. There's your different symbols and how it works. You guys can use that as a reference. We did talk about import statements. So if we want to use another module somebody else created or one that's built into Python, for example, the regex one that we just talked about, we have the import statement, and then you list whatever module you want to import. No, imports always go at the top of your programs. So when you guys are working on your midterm projects, always import stuff at the very top of your project. Does anybody know why we would do that? What happens if we import in the middle of the project and it doesn't exist? Yeah, the project will crash midway through, right? If you put it at the beginning, at least we know the program's going to crash right off the bat and we can fix it. But we don't want to get halfway through your program and then you do an import and I don't realize I need that module and then it crashes. That's not fun. All right. You have a way of doing import module, in which case I would have to say whatever that module is, like RE dot, whatever I want to use out of that module. So if you guys remember random number, right? We use random. You had to use random dot random int in order to generate a random integer. If I want to just pull one function out of that, for example, random int, I would say from random import random int. That just brings that one function over, as opposed to bringing the entire module in. So why would we want to do one or the other? If you're going to use more than just one thing out of random, bring over the whole random module. If you're just going to use one little function out of it, just bring in the function. The reason for that is if you're memory constrained when you're writing the code, for example, you're doing this on a little embedded controller, or you only have so much memory, RAM, etc. on whatever you're running this on, you would want to make sure you only import what's necessary. All right, so here's the example of the random module that we talked about. Import random, we use the random int function, so random.random int, in which case we give it a number to start at and a number to stop at. Notice the random int is going to be where we start and stop. We stop but include this number. So remember, range we go up to but do not include. Random int, we include that last number. It's one of those that are goofy. We talked about the sys module. The main thing we used out of sys was sys.exit. What that allows us to do is end the program right away. So if a question on the midterm said, how do we end the program right away? Sys.exit. That'll get us out of the program. We talked about the copy module. This is so that we can copy lists or dictionaries. If we just do it otherwise, if we modify one, it changes all the other ones, right? So we use copy.copy to make a copy of a list where it's its own entity. If it is a list containing other lists, we use deep copy. It's the only reason you would use deep copy. We also talked about the pretty print module. Pretty print is used to make dictionaries nice and pretty when we print out all their results. It's that simple. We use prettyprint.prettyprint, ppprint.pp, right? We also have the P format. P format is just going to forward it out as a string so that we can print it out however we want. We talked about the paperclip module. This is how we can interact with the clipboard inside your computer, right? So paperclip.copy, paperclip.paste. We copy what's on the and send it to the clipboard. We paste whatever's on the clipboard. No, paperclip does not come with Python. We must pip install paperclip to use it. And then last but not least, the RE module, which is where we can use regex. Right? References were fine. Comments. When we comment inside of our code, we typically use a line comment, which is a hashtag, right? Anything after that, Python's going to ignore. For example, line is a comment, right? If we want to have multiple lines, we use triple double quotes. Triple double quotes allow us to type a bunch of text in the middle without having to comment out every single line. This is what you guys will use on your midterm project to explain what your project is. Your guys' initial comments at the top of every homework assignment, those are line comments. Black screen. That's it. Anybody got any questions? I know it's a lot, but remember, you get to use the PowerPoint, you get to use the video, you have an hour to complete it, etc. All right. Remember, there's only 20 questions out of all that material that you found there. Most of them are matching, true, false, multiple choice, stuff like that. So a good matching one would be something like this. Which one is I give you these, and then you have to match whether that's a string or an integer or a floating point, right? Yeah. Yes. Yep. So don't spend all your time on one question, right? Because you got to get through the exam. I will tell you, most people on this midterm exam usually score a B or higher, right? When you first get your grade, you're not going to get a B or higher, right? Because I have to what? Hand grade it, all right? Please don't send me a ton of emails saying I should get answers on. Well, okay, give me a second. Let me find it. All right. Anybody else got any questions?